So I think one of the topics that we wanted to touch on here was AI and the significant energy demands that AI requires, especially with the newer frontier models and using generative AI as it's becoming more and more pervasive in a lot of our work. The question always comes up, and I think Laurel has a statistic about it, about the percentage of energy that these large data centers are currently taking up and the projections for what they'll be taking up in the future. This is a significant concern, not only in energy that's required for the computation, but also the water that's necessary for the cooling, the energy that's necessary for the cooling of these large data centers because the servers put off a tremendous amount of heat. So I think there's justifiable concern about the climate impact of these large data centers and the AI that's driving it. However, I do want to also point out some of the solutions that are on the horizon or some mitigating factors regarding these big data centers and computation in general. Scientists at UC Berkeley, and I'm sure at all of the UC systems in some way or another, are also working on improving the algorithms and the architecture for these big data systems to be able to improve and optimize for energy efficiency. So I think through research, we will also see a reduction in the energy demand for some of these big data centers. There are different ways to go about that. Sometimes it's within the architecture of the data centers themselves, the chips, semiconductors that are going into the computational hardware that's required for these things. Sometimes it's within the algorithms themselves. So for example, if you can set the algorithm to respond not immediately, but give it a few milliseconds, even that delay can reduce the energy demand on the systems. And there are other strategies within the computer science approach itself to try to mitigate some of the great energy demands for AI. I also wanted to point out that there's the technical approach, there's also a regulatory approach, and a number of the California senators and assembly members are also thinking about this. So, for instance, one of the problems of these big data centers has been that the cost must be borne right now across all of the ratepayers. So for instance, if a big company like Meta puts in a big data center, then of course the energy rates may go up for everyone, not just for Meta. And so Senator Padilla has introduced some legislation so that the ratepayers would be protected from some of those rate increases that are due to big data centers being put in by these corporate entities. Another one that I think would interest this group perhaps is Assembly Member Rebecca Bauer-Kahn has also introduced some legislation to simply require these big data center providers to report on their energy usage. So once we have that information, it will make it much easier as we go down a regulatory path, or even for people who are trying to manage perhaps their own data use and intensity of use of these computational facilities. But simply to have that information is something that her legislation is proposing.